And as promised on the Praise Power Line, I have author, public speaker, entrepreneur, and small business niche marketer, Brian L. Thompson on the phone line. Brother Thompson, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I'm glad to be with you this morning.
Man, we are glad, so glad that you're here, my brother. And we just thank God for you. And most of all, you are a mighty man of God. And we do appreciate you. And we honor you, my brother. And we thank you so much for being on the Good News broadcast.
Thank you so much.
Now, Brother Brian, now let me ask you this. You have a brand new book, The Revelation Gate, coming out June the 7th. Talk about a little bit about your book.
Okay. First, I want to thank you, give honor to God for being here. The Revelation Gate, very excited about it. It's my new book. If I was going to say not too much about it, I would talk about the background. It's set in an African-like setting, approximately what you would call like 800 BC.
Okay.
And you've got a group of people, the Uche, who have been oppressed for a number of years by this barbaric mountain race called the Otei. And all the hope that the Uche has is their prophets foretell this king, MKO and Bozi, who's supposed to come forth and have unbreakable bones, and he's going to go to the Revelation Gate and enter it and free them from this oppression. The problem is that he's a descendant of a king that the Otei destroyed a number of years ago. What we come to find out is that part of his line still exists, and that one of the young ladies in the book is the mother of the deliverer. So really what it goes forth from that point is after he's born, the Otei just decide to destroy all the Uche children to eliminate the possibility of him existing. So he and his mother go into hiding, and when they come back, there's a new king that's in power who's even more cruel than the first, and then they have to go through a number of challenges in order for him to grow up so that he can be the person that he's supposed to be.
Now, Brother Brian, let me ask you this now. We're going to get into who you are, actually. Now,
okay.
Your background is as a journalist, and most recently you was a high school teacher. But what made you leave it and pursue a full-time writing career?
I have to be honest. It's nothing of my own design. It was just the call of God in my life, and I heard it when I was a senior at Morehouse College in Atlanta, and I felt that I wanted to be a writer. I just didn't really know how to go about it. So I went to my counselor. My counselor said, you can take some more courses or graduate on time. So that was my decision there. And I ended up going into teaching for a little bit after 3 years in journalism, which, helped me with my writing career as well. And when I got my teaching position at Newton High School in Covington, the Lord spoke to me and told me that you have 5 years here. So my 5th year was last year. And I was a little nervous, and he kept pressing on my spirit that it was time for me to go. And it got to the point where I was more afraid not to go than I was to go. So that's what initially led me to the decision. We started Great Nation Publishing in May of that year, and it sort of just progressed from there.
Now, Brother Brian, what made you actually be a Christian fiction author opposed to any other writing style?
That's a good question. I really felt in my heart that Christian fiction needed a new voice, a new African-American voice as well. I could have gone the traditional route, I guess you could say, but I just really felt that God was calling me to write Christian fiction with from a different perspective. A lot of the Christian fiction that I've read is taking place in present day or something of that kind, and tends to be a little on the formulaic side. Of course, you have those that deviate from it, but
right.
I really felt it was kind of like a challenge for me in writing Christian fiction that was clean, but was interesting enough to catch a secular audience, and that's been my mission ever since.
Now, you publish your own works independently.
Yes, sir.
What made you go independently instead of, the mainstream publishing?
Well, I'll be honest. I first tried to go mainstream publishing, and it didn't turn out to be as successful as I wanted it to be. I didn't get picked up by a major publisher. And then last February, not this past February of 2010, Stephanie Perry Moore, who's a Christian fiction author, came to the school where I was teaching and had a workshop. So I kind of cornered her after she had her presentation, and I said, this is the trouble that I'm having. I've written a book. My first book was The Lost Testament, and it was published last year. We put it out last year, and it took me about an 8-year process to get it where I wanted it. So she told me a story about how for 7 years she couldn't get published, and she actually eventually did. But what she advised me to do was to go a self-publishing route, get 2,000 books out there. Once I did that, write another book, and then I could get the attention of the traditional publishers. And I studied self-publishing, and there were some things that I liked and some things that I didn't like. There's a stigma kind of attached to it that if you self-publish, it's going to be poorly edited. It's going to look self-published, and then it's just not good. Also, if you're self-published, then certain retailers won't carry you. So what in the investigative process that I went through, I started studying. It's really important for me to learn my craft. I found that there was another option, which is independent publishing. Basically, what that is you can think of a large publishing group like Penguin or Jonathan or one of those places. Being an independent publisher means there's nothing that distinguishes me from any of them except that they put out more titles per year than I do. We put out one, they put out maybe 20. It was important to me to gain more control over my work. When you go to a traditional publishing house, you're with you're a publicist, you're marketers, you're with image consultants, and that's fine. And I'm not saying anything against that, but you lose a degree of control over your work. And I wanted to be responsible for what I was putting out there and not have it dictated by somebody who said it would be more marketable if I change this or change that. There are a couple other factors. Timeline, I wanted to get it out quicker than maybe the year, 2 years that traditional publishing takes. I got to be honest, the finances for a traditional publisher, you get between 6 to 15%. As an independent publisher, and even as a self-publisher in some instances, you can get between 80 to 90 if you know what you're doing. And the last thing was that I wanted to pass something on to my daughter. The word speaks about a righteous man leaving an inheritance for his children's children. Yes. So my daughter, if I were to die today, every royalty that I make for 70 years would still go to her. And I wanted to leave her something of substance.
Amen, amen, amen. Now, if anybody have joined us, we're speaking with Christian fiction author Brian L. Thompson right here on the Good News broadcast on thepraisehouse.com, and we're talking about his new book, The Revelation Gate. But before we get back into the Revelation Gate, Brother Brian, let's talk about some of the influences that some of the authors who have influenced you.
Okay. I'm a big classical fiction nut, so Shakespeare, Leo Tolstoy, even more modern, Toni Morrison, Chinua Achebe, and I'll mention him later. He was, his book, Things Fall Apart, was really kind of instrumental in leading me to give the work an African feel to it. And Jerry D. Jenkins and Tim LaHaye, the Left Behind series changed my life when I read it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now let's talk about the Revelation Gate some more.
Okay.
Now I see that the settings and the characters and also the cultural aspect are largely African American or African influence. What led you to this?
You know, it's kind of like I was just juggling the idea around in my head. Originally, I wanted to write a superhero story, and because that's something of interest to me as well. We don't have a lot of African American superheroes, and if they are, they're not well known. So I originally started out wanting to do that, but what I found out was when I was reading, my wife actually was reading Things Fall Apart, and then I took the book because it's something I really, really loved when I got the opportunity to read it in college. I thought to myself, I'm like, what would it be like if I could make a twist on a superhero tale, like not actually him flying around in a cape and bullets bouncing off his chest or anything like that, but what if I took a character and gave him kind of otherworld-like powers, but put him in an African setting? What would it be like? And I felt like it would be a twist. It would be an interesting enough twist to get somebody's attention. Be like, wow, this is a story that's set in Africa, or an African-like setting. It's not set in Africa because I make up the name of the land where it's in, but it's got a lot of those cultural aspects to it. So it was an area of interest for me, and it took a lot of research, but I found that it was something that would have been interesting enough to give the book a hook to maybe somebody who had the same interest as me.
Now, I know, you write Christian fiction, but
yes.
How much of this book or the events in this book are realistic?
That's a good question. I think if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and the events of the Bible, you could make a case for everything in there being realistic. What the Revelation Gate is, it's got allegorical elements. So you'll see things that happen that will remind you of something that happens in the Bible if you're familiar with it. If you're unfamiliar with it, then maybe it's going to seem like a more fantastical tale to you than anything else, but still enjoyable nonetheless.
Now, are the experiences of any of the characters based on the experiences of someone you know, or something that you've experienced in life yourself?
Okay. I'll be honest, I'll be careful because, you don't want to get sued.
Right.
The people, my wife knows me very well, more than anybody on the earth. So when she'll see an element of me in a character and identify it. So I like to say there's a piece of me in a lot of different characters. As far as their experiences go, I can't say that it's something that somebody that I knew went through and then I fictionalized it, but I will say that they'll be able to identify with it. My mother's part of my reading group. I have a focus group that I get together, and I let them see it beforehand, before it's edited and all the other good stuff. And she said that she identified with one of the characters because of the kind of lifestyle that she had at the time, and there was some trauma that she went through that she could identify with.
Now, Brother Brian, what was actually the hardest part in writing the Revelation Gate?
I'll be honest, the research. And I try to get away from that. I will get away from it. I'm writing my third book now, and it really doesn't have much research. But both with this book and the last book is the research. And then because we have an African-like setting, if you haven't been to Africa before, like I haven't, you have to research the climate and the kinds of food they eat, the kind of clothes they wear. I consulted a friend of mine that I mentioned in my book, Jeff Ransom, as far as the weapons that they use. That's a big pet peeve of his because if you have something that doesn't fit weapon-wise, then people who follow that kind of stuff will be